With it being the start of a new year and well over 2 since my first Xbox video, I thought it'd be an appropriate time to have a look back at the games I've played so far and rank them on their difficulty with a good old tier list. Now this is obviously going to be very subjective and I'm expecting a fair amount of disagreement, so please feel free to tell me how wrong I am and what you would do differently. It is quite hard to rank some of these as it is so personal. For instance, if you've never played Guitar Hero, then obviously all those titles would probably just go straight in the S tier. But I've tried to somehow blend how difficult I believe that the games are to me with how challenging they would be to any random gaming enthusiast. I'm going to cover them in the order of oldest video to newest and rank them from D tier up to S, and with all that out of the way, let's get into it. The first game I tackled on this channel was Assassin's Creed, and this is not a difficult one at all. In fact, there is only one difficulty setting, but it can be very frustrating. The achievements are really straightforward and basically just story related and collectibles, but those collectibles are where the problems can be. In total there are 420 flags to find across the various regions, with no in-game map or way of tracking which ones you've picked up, which is why it took me so long to finish the achievements. Back in the day I went for this and ended up with 99 out of 100 flags in 2 of the areas, and I just couldn't bring myself to go through each one again checking, and clearly it did a good job of traumatizing me because at some point after that I deleted my save file, meaning for this video I had to start a new game and play through until I had all of the necessary locations unlocked. And this time I was able to successfully follow along with an online map, picking up my last 2 achievements once all the flags were ticked off. However, despite it taking me about 14 years to build the mental strength up to do it, and the ridiculous amount of collectibles to find, Assassin's Creed is not a hard game, and I'd say anyone who is watching this video would have no problems whatsoever 100%ing it, meaning that in my eyes at least, it only gets a spot in the D tier. With the moral boost of finally finishing Assassin's Creed, I decided to push the boat out a rather large amount to move my attention to the orange box. Containing 99 achievements across 5 games, this was definitely a big step up, and even though I already had 94 of the achievements ticked off, this was still a pretty daunting task. My missing achievements required me to play 3 of the games, firstly working through the entirety of Half-Life 2, crossing the Antlion Beach without touching the sand, killing an enemy with the toilet, and finding all of the collectibles along the way. Portal was where the real difficulty was, earning gold medals on all of the challenges, and this is in my opinion the hardest achievement in the game, so if you can get this one done then you should be fine to 100% it. There are plenty of guides online, so my advice is just to study those and then get practicing. Team Fortress 2, unsurprisingly, has a bunch of multiplayer achievements which fortunately I managed to mostly tick off by just playing the game in the years following its release, so by the time it came to finishing my remaining achievements I was only left with 1,000 kills, which is easily boostable. I'm not sure how active TF2 is on the Xbox these days, but you can probably find groups on True Achievements who want to boost if you're wanting to do the same. So whilst there's a ton to get through, including collectibles and multiplayer, I think that very few of the achievements are actually a challenge difficulty wise, so for now at least, I'm going to put the orange box as a high B tier. Next I moved on to Modern Warfare 3, and all I had left for this one was Spec Ops achievements. Unfortunately, this included buying 3 DLC packs which for some reason were still £10 each, even though the game had been out for about 11 years. And all of these needed to be completed on Veteran, and I ended up doing most of them co-op, apart from the odd mission which seemed easier solo. There were a couple that took some brain power learning and developing a bit of a strategy, but most we took down with little problems. And other than that, I had some base game Spec Ops achievements left which were all to do with the survival mode, reaching wave 15 on each map, and then buying everything from the in-game armories. Call of Duty is obviously well known for its veteran single player campaigns being a bit of a nightmare, but Modern Warfare 3 is actually one of the easiest in my opinion. So even if I was factoring it in right now, I don't think it would make much of a difference. And if I think about some of the other Call of Duties that are to come, then I definitely can't place this one too high. So I think Modern Warfare 3 also belongs in the B tier. Portal 2 was another title that I had very few achievements left on. In fact, it was pretty much only one that required actually playing the game, completing Course 4 without myself or my co-op partner dying. Nothing a bit of trial and error couldn't solve. I honestly can't even remember the rest of this game because it had been so long since I played it, but there's nothing close to the difficulty of Portal 1's challenges, and when thinking about it in the grand scheme of all the games on the list, I'll confidently place it in D tier. After a nice easy one, I thought I deserved some pain and suffering, so why not pick a game that requires multiple playthroughs, one of which you can't die on, has hundreds of collectibles and some absolutely ridiculous challenge events. If that sounds appealing to you, then I can recommend Prototype. I actually ended up completing the story at least 3 times on my way to picking up all of the achievements, once to unlock the hard difficulty, then on hard difficulty itself. And this is pretty tough, but I did admittedly make it even more challenging for myself by not properly learning all of the game's mechanics, and in a final run on easy without dying. The collectibles are what you'd expect, a massive pain because there's so many and not a good way of tracking which ones you have, but ultimately they don't require any skill, just mental strength. The real test are the challenge events, ranking you in various categories from movement to just killing as much as you can before the time runs out. Apparently the difficulty that you're playing the story on affects the enemies in the events, and I had so much trouble with some of those whilst I was only on easy, I cannot imagine attempting them on anything higher. The PT achievement requires platinum medals in all events, and overall I'd say that the movements are the hardest categories, but there is a war event called Raid, which was my last to finish, and it is an absolute nightmare. Basically you're just relying on an AI tank to help you out enough, and you better be willing to sit there and restart it over and over until everything falls into place. I did consider putting Prototype in the S tier, and I still might change my mind, but I think for now it's going to sit at the top of A. After that was Left 4 Dead, and at the time of completing this, I genuinely felt like it was one of my greatest gaming accomplishments, purely because I've been wanting to finish it off for over 10 years, and the expert difficulty achievements just seemed like an elusive dream that was never going to actually happen. But now that some time has passed and the dust has settled, it really wasn't that bad. I still think that there is a challenge to be found, especially with the lack of checkpoints and not being able to save and stop a campaign and pick up where you left off. That definitely adds some mental strain, especially when you're not particularly good at Left 4 Dead like myself. For example, the Blood Harvest campaign alone took us over 3 hours to survive. And I know that there are people out there, especially those who play on the PC, who can run through entire campaigns on Expert in 20 minutes, but that's not me, and seeing as I get to choose where the games go in this list, I'm going to put Left 4 Dead on the lower end of A tier. And this is only solidified in my opinion if you take into consideration all of the other achievements in the game that I'd already unlocked. Next up is Call of Duty 4. The achievements are extremely straightforward and basically all unlockable by completing the campaign on Veteran. There are some very hard sections, obviously the iconic Mile High Club, which is the game's epilogue and probably sits on top of the difficulty ladder, but I'll give honourable mentions to the no fighting in the war room and one shot one kill missions. I've completed it enough times to not really struggle anymore, but I can still appreciate it and it's definitely harder than Modern Warfare 3, so it's going into A. I'm already starting to get the feeling that I'll be shuffling these around a lot at the end. For my next video, I took on one of my favourite games of all time, BioShock. And just like Modern Warfare, I'd already maxed the gamer score on it way back in the day, so I did it again on a new profile for the purpose of a video. And all 51 achievements can be taken down in just one playthrough. The hardest achievement would probably be Brass Balls for effectively completing the game on the highest difficulty without dying, although this can be made trivial by the fact that you can save whenever you want and just reload the game if you do die. You're going to want to use a guide for the collectibles, specifically audio diaries, because a few of these are actually missable, and that's pretty terrible game design in my opinion, because they also require all to be found for the achievement. I think Dead Space, for instance, has a much better system where you only need to find around 95% of the logs to unlock the achievement. So yes, BioShock is, in my opinion, one of the greatest games ever made, and I would highly recommend each and every one of you play it, but the 100% isn't going to cause you any trouble, especially if you're following a guide and happy to reload your save whenever you die. I think that the fact it actually has a difficulty setting will stop me putting it in D tier, but it's not a challenging completion. And now to the remake of the game that made me buy the original Xbox, Halo Combat Evolved. This one is made significantly easier if you have a friend to do the legendary campaign with, which I did for the majority of the levels. The mission select option makes finding all of the collectibles and attempting the mission specific achievements nice and straightforward, and a couple of those achievements in particular can be pretty tricky, but again, as long as you meet the requirements, a co-op partner can just carry you through the level without a care in the world. And that partner could just be you on another controller. And the hardest achievement and the last that I unlocked is That Just Happened for completing the notorious library level in heroic or higher without dying. But this has a cheesy strategy where you can just save and quit if you die but before you respawn, and then load back into level at your last checkpoint. If those kind of things go against your gaming morals, then Combat Evolved would probably sit quite high on this list, but for me and how I went about tackling it, it will take a spot in C for now. And next I took on one of my favourite Rockstar titles and a game that I hadn't played since the PlayStation 2 version all of those years ago. The extremely enjoyable and undeniably offensive Bully. Just like every other Rockstar title, this one takes some time, but it's definitely the easiest of the bunch. Only one playthrough is needed and then everything else can be mopped up in the Endless Summer free roam mode. There are some tedious tasks, and lots of miscellaneous things to complete, but nothing that's going to stop Bully from going into the D tier. And speaking of games that take some time, I finally built up the mental strength to finish my missing Fallout 3 achievements. Unfortunately, this was another one that I no longer had the save file for, so I had to start from zero. I had a few base game things left to mop up, but most of the remaining game score was found within the 5 DLC packs, one of which can only be accessed by completing all of the story missions anyway. This one definitely needs some planning as there are some missable achievements, in particular those for reaching certain levels with good, neutral and evil karma, but as long as you're aware of them you can just save close to the level requirements and do each one that way. The game's difficulty is adjustable, but I honestly don't think I touched it once. Maybe it can be tough on the higher difficulties, but for me I didn't really have any trouble playing through on normal. The main challenge with this completion is just the sheer amount of time it takes. And that's why I'll be putting it into the C tier. Next is the Call of Duty game that many consider to be the hardest veteran campaign of the lot. And yeah, it's pretty hard. Just like Modern Warfare, there are a few standout nightmare missions in World at War. I actually struggled with Blowtorch and Corkscrew the most on this playthrough. I think it took me about 30 minutes just to get to the first checkpoint, so that was fun. And of course, a shout out to the iconic Heart of the Reich. I managed to get through the entire thing on Veteran in just one, admittedly long day, but I did die so many times that I quickly stopped counting. World at War is also of course known for introducing us all to the Zombies game type, with 20 additional achievements becoming available with the purchase of 2 DLC packs, which again, still haven't been reduced in price after all these years. I went into this video being a complete Zombies novice because I was always too busy playing the online multiplayer back at release, so it took me a bit of time to learn all of the ropes. If you don't have the luxury of a co-op partner like I did, then several of these achievements will potentially be a big struggle, but for me there was only one that I found really tricky. Big Baller for reaching 75,000 points on the Shi No Numa map. And when I take the whole World at War package into account, it is definitely worthy of a spot in the A tier. Now I'm not sure that there's ever been a bigger downgrade in difficulty than Prototype 1 to 2, but if there has, somebody please tell me, because this game is an absolute joke. I actually can't remember anything about it other than it being staggeringly easy, and when you consider both the ease of this one and thinking back to how absurdly difficult Prototype 1 was, this is going right at the bottom of the list. It doesn't really deserve any more screen time than that. And from the staggeringly easy to the borderline impossible. Guitar Hero 3 is a completion that isn't going to happen unless the stars align. You're going to need to invest enough time to be able to 5-star the setlist on Expert, know someone who can play Expert well enough to help 5-star the co-op setlist, and be able to get them in the same room as you because it's local only co-op, and you'll need at least 8 playthroughs of the career because the difficulty achievements don't stack, and that's before I even get on to the miscellaneous achievements. The hardest of which is the appropriately named Now That's Impressive. Requiring a score of 750,000 points in a single song, this is only available on the base game by near enough mastering through the Fire and Flames and Expert. There is however a significantly easier way of unlocking the achievement by playing All Nightmare Long from the Metallica song pack, but Guitar Hero 3 DLC was removed from the store years and years ago, and even if you do have the added songs, if you're anything like me, it's probably going to be a massive grind anyway. There's also the small matter of needing to win 500 online matches, along with other multiplayer achievements. And Guitar Hero 3, without any doubt, is the first entry into the S tier, and it's gonna take some beating. And it didn't really get much easier for me with the next game, because after that, I was on to Left 4 Dead 2. I still had about half of the achievements left, and there were some really tough ones, which is probably why I'd left it half finished for over a decade. The campaigns are harder than the first, and there's the added factor of realism difficulty, which ended up being my last achievement. Then on top of that, there are a lot of multiplayer things, and even though they're boostable, it's quite a bit of effort setting it all up, especially strength in numbers, which requires you to play as a pre-made team of 4 against another pre-made team of 4. The campaigns were absolutely the hardest part, and again took a lot of trial and error through many attempts over a pretty long period of time. For me, this follows Guitar Hero 3 into the S tier. Modern Warfare 2 is definitely not as much of a challenge as Call of Duty 4. The campaign doesn't really have any standout difficult moments, and even with the added Spec Ops mode, which are made significantly easier with the co-op partner as I had, it's hard to justify this being too close to the harder Call of Duty games. That's no bad thing though, as it results in a far less stressful journey and gives you more time to nostalgically look back to those days of rushing home after school to jump online with your friends. Good times. Modern Warfare 2 takes another spot in B for me. Next I played Rock Band 2, and this is a game very well known for one achievement in particular, the Bladder of Steel. To be honest, this is actually a test of endurance rather than skill, requiring the endless setlist to be completed without failing any songs or even pausing the game. Totaling over 6 hours of straight playing, it can actually be done on any difficulty, but to combine it with some other achievements, I chose to go through it on Expert Base. I did have a bit of a disaster when my guitar started playing up and paused the game, causing me to waste something like 4 or 5 hours, but not to be deterred, I just came back the next day and got it done. If I was taking every achievement in Rock Band 2 into consideration, it would easily be S tier just because it basically requires mastering all of the plastic instruments, but if you're just going for Bladder of Steel as I did, especially taking into account it can be done on whatever difficulty, I'd struggle to put it too high. But ultimately, it does still require 6 straight hours of concentrated gaming, so it can go no lower than B. Next I moved on to another Rockstar game, and one of only a few non-Xbox 360 titles that I've done for a video, GTA 3. And it's an easy one. Obviously it wouldn't be a Rockstar game if it didn't take a long time. There are some missable achievements, but they're all to do with missions that are early in the story, and other than those ambulance missions, I don't think there's actually anything even slightly difficult about getting the 100% completion for GTA 3, so into D tier it's going. The second Guitar Hero game that I took on was Aerosmith, and this is definitely a big step down in difficulty. Not only are the songs just a lot easier, but there's also some quality of life changes, like the career achievement stacking, which make a very welcome change. You'll still need to do multiple playthroughs, as there are co-op achievements for playing the setlist as both the rhythm and lead guitars, as well as some online things to do, but these are easily boostable. There is an achievement that stops this game from being in one of the lower tiers, Score Hero, which involves near enough mastering the toughest setlist song, Train Kept a Rollin'. For me that still wasn't too much of a trouble though, and only took a few attempts. I'm a bit unsure about this one, but I'm gonna put Guitar Hero Aerosmith in the B tier for now. After that, it was time for another veteran campaign, and one that I didn't play back in the day, which is probably for the best because Call of Duty 2 is outrageously hard. There were only 13 achievements, which are all unlocked by beating the highest difficulty. In my opinion, this is the hardest Call of Duty game that I've tackled so far. It also doesn't have the nostalgic fun factor for me that the others have. Throw in the fact that there are 27 missions to get through, and this was definitely one of the least enjoyable gaming experiences that I've had. But hey, if fighting waves of Terminator-like enemies and never knowing if a checkpoint is going to screw you over sounds like fun, then yes, I recommend this game 100%. I am tempted to put this in S tier, but I think top of A is probably fair purely because the achievements are so straightforward. Warriors of Rock is an interesting one because nearly all of the achievements can be obtained by playing on any difficulty. The two obvious exceptions are Hand Mutilator for passing Black Widow on Expert Guitar, and Chosen One for passing Fury of the Storm on Hard or Expert Drums, which is something that I haven't done. There were also unobtainable achievements because some of the Guitar Hero servers have been shut down, so this completion is actually impossible now, I think. The setlist is a lot of fun, but after you've played all 90 odd songs 4 times over, it starts to get just a little bit grindy. Overall, this game is probably like a C difficulty to get 70% of the gamer score in, but once you throw in the difficulty specific achievements, I think it's just about worthy of an A. There are also some band related things that I've left to do, so maybe this will be moved in the future, but I can't imagine I'll be getting around to those anytime soon. Next, I'd like to apologise for my pronunciation of Lasso in my Halo 3 video, and for all the pain that caused. Onto the game itself though, the Master Chief Collection is a bit like the Orange Box, just dialed up to 11, containing 6 Halo titles and 700 achievements for a total of 7,000 gamer score. On my main profile, I have nearly all of the achievements unlocked, but I want to document myself working through this monster, so I started it again. Whilst there are obviously a ton of achievements related to each specific game, from finishing them on Legendary in under 3 hours to finding all of the collectibles, the hardest challenge is without a doubt the Lasso difficulty achievements. Halo 3's Lasso is probably somewhere in the middle in terms of difficulty when comparing the titles, the obvious winners being Combat Evolved and of course Halo 2. If you're doing this in a group, it'll really test your friendships because one of the skulls causes you to revert to the last checkpoint if anyone dies. And we started out as a team of 4, but by the halfway point it was only 2 of us left standing to finish the game. I think there are around 9 playable missions, and in the end we spent a good 2 or 3 hours average on most of them. There's an absolute ton I could say about this, but for the purpose of keeping this from running too long, just know it is extremely hard, and I wish anyone luck who embarks on the same journey. And if you want a guide of probably what not to do, then check out my video on it. In my opinion, the Master Chief Collection's Halo 3 Lasso achievement is worthy of a place in the S tier. My latest Call of Duty experience, and one I'm actually still working on, is Black Ops 1. I took on the veteran campaign for a video and I plan to do the zombies maps as a separate upload in the future. I finished one of the add-ons, but the others are way more complicated than World at War's achievements, so I'm just building up the strength to learn all of the strategies. But back to veteran, I did most of the game in a single sitting, and the toughest moment of the campaign was basically self-inflicted because I didn't understand what the objective actually was, and apart from that, there's nothing that stands out to me, other than this very entertaining bug. I think that this, Modern Warfare 2 and 3 are all very similar in difficulty for the campaigns. Black Ops' campaign is probably harder, but the Modern Warfare 3 Spec Ops, especially the DLC missions, mean it's close as a package. But overall, I'm going to give the edge to Black Ops because of the zombies achievements, some of which do require several players and a lot of coordination. Hopefully I can get all those wrapped up sooner rather than later. And ending in style with my most recent video, Guitar Hero 2. Is this as bad as Guitar Hero 3? No. Is it still nearly impossible? Yes. The achievements are much more simple, there are fewer miscellaneous tasks to be done, and all the multiplayer gamer score comes from co-op, which if you and your partner are good enough, you can do in just a song or two. But that's the problem, both of you being good enough, and then getting in the same room again because it's local only. There's also the small matter of mastering a much harder game engine to 5-star the expert career set list and pass one of the craziest songs ever put in a rhythm game. The more punishing engine doesn't outweigh the fact that there are no carp career or 500 wins achievements to grind out though, so ultimately it falls short of the top spot, but I've absolutely no doubts or hesitation that Guitar Hero 2 is the second hardest game that I've completed on this channel. So now I've placed each game, how do I feel about this tier list and my initial decisions? Well, first of all, I've definitely made it hard for myself by comparing games I've completed with ones I've only part finished. For example, the Master Chief Collection will no doubt be moving higher into S when I dig deeper into the 700 achievements. As a side note, isn't it just beautiful seeing the cover art of all these nostalgic games grouped up? Anyway, overall I'm pretty happy. Maybe in the next update I'll end up swapping some bits around, but for now I'll leave it as it is. Hopefully I'll have enough new games to add to it next year to warrant a video because they do take a while. I do have a seemingly never-ending list of titles though that I want to cover from the Xbox 360 to the Series X. And in the meantime, please let me know in the comments how much you agree or disagree with what I've done, and if you have any games that you'd like to see me play and add to the tiers in the future, then comment those also. Or even ideas for doing another sort of tier list. But other than that, thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.